I never thought buying a used helicopter on Craigslist would put me on a watch list. But there I was, standing on my porch in pajama pants, coffee in hand, while two police officers asked if I was operating a civilian surveillance aircraft. And Karen, our neighborhood self-declared security officer, was talking to a news crew like she'd just uncovered an international crime ring. Yeah, that was my Saturday. And if you're wondering how a lawnmower search turned into a federal inquiry, you're not alone. It started, like most questionable life choices, at 2 in the morning. I was mindlessly scrolling Craigslist for a used mower when I clicked onto the aviation section, because of course Craigslist has an aviation section, and saw it. Lightly used helicopter, runs great, $10,000 or best offer. I laughed. Then I stared too long. Then I had a thought no adult man should trust. Impulsively. Why not? So naturally, I called Mike, my best friend, part-time mechanic, and full-time enabler of chaos. I said, excited, "There's a helicopter on Craigslist." He said, eager, "When are we picking it up?" 3 days later, we were standing in a wide-open field with a man named Ed who looked like he once repaired helicopters with duct tape and chewing gum. Paperwork? Skeptical. Nope. Inspections? Definitely not. But the man had a handshake and a trailer full of ambition. We loaded the thing up, drove it across town, and parked it in my backyard, casually. No plan, no license, just vibes. Ominously. This is where Karen enters the story. Her name is actually Karen. She's the HOA president, the head of the neighborhood watch, and the moderator of the community Facebook group. She lives 3 doors down and has a laminated copy of the HOA guidelines for every home in the development. And a backup in her car. When I parked the helicopter in my yard, I saw Karen through her blinds, watching like she was live streaming a criminal investigation. A few hours later, I had a note taped to my front door, sternly. "Remove aircraft immediately. This is not an airport." I took a picture and put it on the fridge like it was a kindergarten drawing. The next morning, I woke up to 34 messages in the neighborhood group chat. Curious. Is that a real helicopter? Inquisitive. Are you training for something? Excited. Can I take a selfie with it? And then Karen, of course. Authoritative. This is a violation of Section 4, subsection B of the HOA guidelines and possibly several federal laws, I replied. Defiant. It's not going anywhere. Dryly. That didn't go over well. Karen went full Inspector Gadget. She left printouts of FAA regulations in my mailbox. She dropped off a flyer titled, "Dangers of Civilian Aircraft." And meanwhile, the helicopter became a minor tourist attraction. Tom brought his kid over for pictures. Teenagers started using it as a TikTok background. One guy asked if I was renting it out for birthdays. Then came the barbecue. I invited a few friends over, cracked open a couple of beers, lit the grill, and the helicopter stood there like a giant, glorious conversation starter. Cassie, a neighbor's daughter, came over with her dad. She's obsessed with aviation and asked if she could sit inside. I said, of course. The look on her face made everything worth it. The next morning, another note appeared. Allowing minors near hazardous, unregulated machinery is irresponsible. Please reconsider your actions. Laminated again. I was starting to think she had a portable laminator strapped to her hip. A few days later, 2 police officers knocked on my door. Serious faces. Not quite angry, just confused. Serious. We've received a report about an unlicensed aircraft on your property. Thoughtful. Possibly involving surveillance equipment. I was still in a t-shirt that said, "World's okayest neighbor," and tried not to laugh. I showed them the backyard. Empty tank, dead engine, locked cockpit. One officer looked it over and said, 15 years on the force and this is a first for me. They chuckled, told me I wasn't breaking any laws, and left. Karen was just getting started, determined. She launched a full neighborhood campaign. Protect our neighborhood, ban backyard aircraft. She posted blurry photos in the Facebook group, shared articles about freak helicopter accidents, and created a poll asking, should aviation be allowed in residential areas? Most people ignored her. A few replied with, As long as it's not flying, who cares? And someone actually wrote, "Karen, please touch grass." Then came the HOA special meeting. Karen showed up looking like she'd been prepping for a Supreme Court hearing. Binder, charts, graphs, even a miniature toy helicopter for dramatic emphasis. She gave a long presentation about safety, property values, and what she called the criminal element of suburban aviation. Yes, that's a direct quote. I got up when it was my turn and said, "Calm. It doesn't run. It's safer than most lawn equipment, and a few neighborhood kids are now interested in aviation because of it. So really, this helicopter's done more good than harm." The board looked at each other, nodded, and ruled that I hadn't violated any HOA guidelines. Meeting over. Karen packed up her binder in complete silence. For most people, that would have been the end of it. But you already know, this wasn't most people, and this definitely wasn't over. The next time the police showed up, they weren't laughing. There had been more reports, this time about a potential national security concern. A neighbor had apparently suggested the helicopter might contain surveillance equipment. I invited the officers in, again. They looked inside the cockpit, under the frame, checked the storage compartments. They asked if it had been flown, if it had fuel, or if there were modifications. Resigned. I said no to all three. One of them rubbed his temples and said, "Do people around here always call the police over Craigslist listings?" I told them about Karen, and they nodded like they'd heard it all before. When they left, I figured maybe that was the end of it. But then, a few days later, I got a letter, government seal, no return address, just my name. Inside was a printed notice, formal. "We have received a report of unauthorized aircraft storage and potential surveillance activity at your residence. Please contact our office to resolve this matter." Karen had actually gone federal. I called the number, sat on hold for 10 minutes. Then a voice came on, calm and a little tired. I explained the whole story. The Craigslist find, the backyard, the kids taking pictures, the HOA president on a crusade. There was a pause. Then the agent said, "Calm, tired. I've been in this job 7 years, and I've never had a helicopter complaint." Reassuring. He told me as long as it wasn't flying, I had nothing to worry about. They were just following up on a civilian report. Somehow that was both reassuring and deeply ridiculous. But the damage had been done. People in the neighborhood had started acting different. Some neighbors stopped waving. Parents rushed their kids past my house. The guy who used to ask about my grill setup now avoided eye contact. Even Cassie's dad pulled her inside early one afternoon when we were out back chatting near the helicopter. I had become the neighborhood mystery, the subject of whispers, the weirdo with the aircraft. One night, as I took out the trash, I saw a car parked across the street. Someone was taking pictures. That's when I considered selling it. I called Mike. Resigned. "Dude." Sighs. I said, "I think it might be time." Supportive. He said, "You do what you gotta do, but don't let Karen win." I didn't sleep much that night. Then came Saturday, and the news van. I walked out onto my porch, coffee in hand, expecting silence. Instead, I saw flashing lights, cameras, and a polished reporter standing next to Karen, who looked like she'd spent the whole night practicing her speech. Behind them, a folding table with flyers, a sign that read, "Protect Our Skies," and her ever-present binder. The reporter approached me. "Sir, we're covering reports of unregulated aviation concerns in this neighborhood. Would you care to comment?" I looked straight at the camera and said, "I was just trying to buy a lawnmower." The clip went viral. After that, everything started to fizzle out. The police came one last time and told Karen once again that nothing illegal had been found. Her Facebook group cooled off. Her flyers disappeared. The petition board vanished. The meeting requests stopped. The HOA moved on to arguing about fence colors and garbage bins. The helicopter just sat there, silent, dusty, part decoration, part legend. And then, one quiet afternoon, Cassie and her dad came back. He looked sheepish. "Hey," he said, "I owe you an apology. The whole thing got out of hand." Cassie jumped into the cockpit, rattling off facts about planes, asking about every switch and dial. She told me she wanted to fly planes when she grew up. That moment made all of it worth it. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A black SUV pulled into my driveway. 2 men stepped out. Suits, sunglasses, clipboards. I braced for another round of federal drama. They introduced themselves. Turns out they weren't agents. They were from a local aviation museum. They'd seen the news story, heard about the helicopter, thought it was hilarious and historic in its own weird way. They offered to buy it. I stared at them. "You want the Craigslist helicopter?" They said it would be displayed indoors, cleaned up, preserved as a piece of quirky neighborhood history. Best part? They wanted to mount a plaque under it that read, "The Suburban Spycraft Incident, the Craigslist helicopter that triggered a federal investigation." They even joked about using my name, the Craigslist pilot who never took off. I shook their hands and watched them load it up onto a flatbed one last time. Karen stood on her porch, silent. I waved at her. She didn't wave back, but she also didn't frown. That's about as close as we'll ever get to a peace treaty. The next week, I got a postcard in the mail. It was from the museum. There was the helicopter, cleaned up, on display behind a glass case. Underneath it, the plaque was real. Not all heroes fly. Some just park weird. A few nights later, Tom from next door stopped by. He brought a 6-pack and said, "You know what? I kinda miss the thing." At least it made the neighborhood interesting. We sat on the porch, had a beer, and for the first time in a long time, things felt normal. So yeah, I bought a helicopter on Craigslist. Karen called the police, the city, the FBI, and a news station. I became a local legend, an HOA horror story, and somehow, a museum donor. It cost me 10.
Thoughtful.
And if you've ever bought something that spiraled way out of control, or had a neighbor like Karen,
Smash that like button if you've ever battled an HOA. Hit subscribe to see what I almost bought next on Craigslist, and comment below, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen in someone's backyard? Bonus points if it's not street legal.
because in America, anything can happen. Even a helicopter.